Hello, everybody. This is Everybody Settle Down. I'm Charlie Marlow. That is the great Eric Messersmith. Today, getting back to some news and politics with the terrible news you see on the headline. Military helicopter crashes. United States military helicopter Black Hawk crashes into an American Airlines plane. 67 people feared to be dead in Washington, D.C. Eric, all 64 people on this plane that was arriving from Wichita, Kansas, are feared to be dead, in addition to the 3 aboard the helicopter. I'm reading here from the local NBC station in Washington, D.C. But this happened last night, Eric, and just a crazy, tragic story. And then also you have today, you have President Trump responding with a press conference and all of the crazy conspiracy theories that we all, unfortunately, are used to when a tragedy like this hits.
Yeah, and we're getting them potentially from the president, which is interesting. We can talk about the politics in a second. With the crash, first of all, just like most of these tragedies that happen, nobody really knows anything in terms of how this happened. But yet that doesn't stop, of course, the wild speculation. And the problem with that, especially when it comes to these collisions or these accidents with air travel, is they take so long to investigate because they're so complicated. They've got to find all the wreckage in the black box and go through all that. And the NTSB has their whole process is going to take probably 6 months just to have an initial report, and then probably a year or two after that to get the final report. So it's not clear exactly what happened. It was unique in some instances. It was a pretty clear night. It doesn't appear like there was any kind of mechanical failure. It appears these two aircraft, the Black Hawk helicopter and the airplane, just crashed into each other somehow, which is crazy. It's the first time that we've had a major, or really, I think, any domestic commercial air crash since 2009. So that just shows you how safe flying is when you consider that we have in America, millions of people in the air every day on domestic flights. And we don't have these things, thank God, for the most part. But obviously, there's going to be a massive investigation. I think one of the things they'll look at beyond what happened in this exact encounter is just the general airspace of Washington, D.C. If you've ever flown into Reagan, and I know I have several times, it's a very unique airport because it's a small airport in a major city. And that is not usually what you see. Typically, smaller airports are in smaller areas, and this is right in D.C. And the problem there, of course, is not only do you have commercial air traffic, you have, like with this Black Hawk helicopter, a lot of military aircraft. You have the aircraft that carries the president, the Department of Defense. Those helicopters are right there. And so they're all flying in similar flight planes with these commercial airlines. And in fact, if you remember, after 9/11, they closed Reagan way longer than every other airport. And it was closed, I think, for months, in part because the planes fly so close to the Capitol, the White House, the Supreme Court, the monuments. And so it's ripe to be exploited, obviously, for terrorism, but also just that congested airspace. As we saw with this, there's no indication, obviously, this is terrorism, but the congested airspace in and of itself could be a problem. But the reason that it has never been closed, in large part, is because members of Congress love the convenience. Most of them fly commercial. Most of them don't fly private. And so they love having that convenience of you can land at Reagan and be at the Capitol or pretty much anywhere in D.C. in like 15 or 20 minutes. Where compared to the other two major airports in that area, BWI and Dulles, which are massive airports, they are, God only knows, with traffic 45 minutes or an hour away from, maybe more. That's what it was, I think, when I lived in that area. It might be even more now from getting to the Capitol in downtown D.C. So that's why that airport has remained open, even though it's kind of an anomaly to have this fairly small airport with these short runways. I believe some of these runways are the shortest we have at major airports in the country, right in D.C. So I think they'll look at some of those root causes as well as what happened in this specific instance. Why was this helicopter and why did this helicopter and this plane collide? I saw some people on here we go with the speculation, right? I I am certainly no expert in commercial aviation or air disasters, but that doesn't stop everybody from speculating. So the most credible theory I've heard so far, which seems to make sense to me, is that the helicopter was in communication with air traffic control, and air traffic control was basically like, hey, watch out for the plane. And the helicopter said something to the effect of, the helicopter pilot, like, I see it. And if you see the videos, there are a lot of planes in that area because, again, it's a small airport with a lot of activity. And so I think what could be the answer is the helicopter pilot saw a different plane, thought that was the plane they needed to watch out for. And meanwhile, from the other side where they weren't looking came the plane that was landing from Kansas that was descending as it was about to hit the runway and maybe hit the top of the chopper or the side and produce this, terrible tragedy.
Yeah. So last night, this is all over the news. Obviously, there's video of it for people that haven't seen it, and I'm sure most people have by now. But it's all over social media, and it was pretty clear in the video. You can see basically exactly what happens. What bothers me, and now we're getting into the reaction, and it's not surprising at all, but just instantaneously, I get so annoyed at the media grifters that without knowing anything, they go right to, and I understand that you can speculate about things, but, oh, there's no way this was an accident. Oh, this was terrorism, this and that. And we don't know exactly what happened. But I also feel like we're in an era where human error or mechanical error, whatever it could be, it's like it no longer exists. Like these things can no longer exist, right? This could just be a terrible accident. And if you hear the communications, it sounds like that might be the case. But then you get right to the fact that you have to line up on the left and the right, and you have to blame. I wonder though, Eric, do you think most people are like this? Because I'm not. But like what you read on social media, people are already lined up on their side, and you kind of know exactly. You kind of know exactly where they're going to go. For example, go back to that plane or the train derailment in Ohio. Well, at that point, Biden's in office, so you have to blame Biden, and for whatever different reason. And now Trump's in office, but it's very early. But Trump has this press conference, and you knew they're going to go either deep state or DEI. And without even knowing, this was something I saw, without even knowing who has died yet. Now, maybe they do, but we haven't seen the names or anything. There's always already all this speculation from the president about DEI. Right? Like coming from Donald Trump, the president, that this is, he just says, I don't know. It could be DEI though. It could be. It's like, what are we doing?
Well, you are right that is the standard operating procedure with any kind of tragedy like this. We see it most often probably with school shootings. It's like, or any kind of mass shooting. What's the identity of the shooter? Right? Is it a right-wing extremist like we saw in that Walmart in Texas who went after Hispanic individuals, or the person in New York who tried to kill African Americans? Is it a transgender person on the other side? Like, you saw, I think that was the one in Tennessee. So, and then of course we talk about gun control, and it all happens so quick. And it makes me uneasy whenever we talk about these things, when we don't really have all the facts and we automatically rush to these sweeping conclusions. It's almost like people are rooting for certain facts to emerge to justify their worldview. And it's really kind of gross. But I want to make a point here. That is expected and almost kind of baked in for people on social media, for grifters who do this as their means of income, for just random people who like to stir shit up. That's almost baked in. It's a different thing for the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States to do it in the White House in front of the media. Okay? That is the difference. And I think we should make sure that we highlight the distinction there. If some crazy person or some person looking to make money or increase their social media followers does it, you could say that's bad, but kind of that's the world we live in. When the president of the United States does it, and if you watch that press conference today, that's what he did as bodies are being pulled out of the Potomac. Not only is he not waiting for that to happen, he's not waiting for any facts. He's blaming Pete Buttigieg, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, DEI, with zero evidence, zero, that DEI had anything to do with this. We'll find out, but it may just be as simple as a terrible tragedy. And I have no idea. None of these people on social media have any idea, and he doesn't have any idea. And yet, right away, he blames it. It's ridiculous. But beyond that, it's just dangerous. And also, by the way, these policies that he lays out, he talks about Barack Obama and certain DEI policies with air traffic controllers or with FAA employees in general. And then he talks about Joe Biden. There was an administration in between those two, and it was led by Donald Trump, and those policies remained all the way through. He acts like Obama and Biden were, consecutive 12 years. That's not how it went down. So that's a point to keep in mind. Also, we have a shortage of air traffic controllers in this country. And so trying to recruit more people to come in to do some of these jobs in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, look, if it is shown that there were people hired who were not qualified because of DEI and somehow those people were involved in this tragic accident, then okay. But I think it's very unlikely that's the case. We'll see. And even if it is the case, he doesn't know that now, but yet that's what he goes to right away. It reminded me of COVID. Like today when I watched this, it reminded me of his response to COVID. Rather than letting experts lead, and look, on COVID, the experts weren't always right. We know that clearly with hindsight, although I think they were more right than wrong. He got way out ahead of his skis on spinning all kinds of theories, some of which had some legitimacy, some of which didn't. And I think if you look at Trump's first week, all in all, up until 2 days ago, I think it was pretty successful in terms of the implementation. You may have agreed or disagreed with some of the things he did, but comparing it to his first administration, they came in and were organized and were disciplined and had messaging and knew what they wanted to do. Like you could see the comparison between this time and last time and how much more disciplined the operation was. And then a few days ago, you got to the government funding freeze, which was a debacle that they had to quickly reverse. And now you have this press conference, which really was, I don't even know what the right word is. Shameful is the word that comes to mind, where he's automatically pinning this on DEI with absolutely no information. And I thought, okay, they had a nice first week in terms of implementation, but are we starting to come off the rails already?
What percentage of people do you think, I don't know what the right word is, like that is not the right word, but feed into that? We all read it, but all that I want, whether it's from Biden or Trump, whether it's the train derailment or a plane crash, I just want my president to just say, hey, this is a terrible tragedy. Thoughts and prayers. We will look into this, obviously. But like, does it have to be political? And I'm wondering, what percentage of the populace do you think wants what I want? Are we normal, or are we abnormal for wanting things to be reasonable? And I understand that social media is not the real world, but it's all you see. And I know that's part of the algorithm. I just wonder, are we ever going to get back to a point? And I wonder when this really started. Was it with Trump? Was it before that? To me, in the Trump era, everything kind of changed from the media standpoint. And I'm not even blaming Donald Trump for all that. It's also social media. I just wonder, will we ever get to a point where there can just be an accident and we can leave it at that and say, we're going to investigate it? Does it always have to be these made up things, by the way, like the DEI? Okay, DEI was taken too far. I agree with that. But when it's always going to be DEI or the deep state and the other side's going to say it's their reasons, Like, do you think we're ever going to get past that? I don't know if we will, because I think we opened up that box, and I don't think social media is going to get any better.
I tend to agree with you. I think you and I actually, the way we look at it, is still in the majority. I think
Okay.
the minority voices are the loudest and they are amplified on social media. But I think you're right. It's hard to go back with the algorithms of social media, the tribalism we have in our politics. But I would say there's a difference between what the reaction is in the online world, which is kind of out of the control of anybody or any even group of people, and what the official position is of the government, which should be unifying and, of course, is led by the president. That is an individual decision by that person or a small group decision. Like, I mean, politically, your response to tragedy matters. It's kind of unseemly to talk about it, right? Because what we really care about and what the most important thing is the people who lost their lives or were impacted. But we have seen tragedies in this country where the response has been pretty good, where the response has been bad, where the response has been in the middle. And the president should act as a unifier and someone who brings facts to the situation. Like, I think about one of the defining speeches Ronald Reagan ever gave was the night he came on TV when the Challenger exploded. And if you've never seen that, go look it up. That was a tremendously tragic event in American history. And I remember as a little kid watching it in school. I was young, but I mean, the nation was devastated. And he came on and comforted the country. I mean, remember George W. Bush after 9/11 when he addressed Congress and he was like hugging Harry Reid, the Democratic leader. And I mean, that was a moment of him, and he had his flaws just like every president did, but that was him bringing the country together in a time of national mourning. Now, obviously this incident is not on the scale of 9/11, but this was a time where he could have brought the country together and he could have said, hey, our hearts go out to these people, which he did. I mean, he did talk about that, but then not try to spin it into the politics. He could have said, hey, we're going to let the investigation play out. We don't really have great information at this point. Let's see how it unfolds before we assign blame or assign a reason for this, rather than going right to the low-hanging fruit that probably isn't even a factor here, and we certainly don't know it is, of DEI. That was really a missed opportunity, just from even putting aside how kind of unseemly and disingenuous it is. It was a missed opportunity politically, I think, for him to prove that he is beyond the kind of petty guy on social media always trying to spin it for political reasons, that he is past that as the president of the United States. And I talked about this the other day when I was doing our other show, Take No Offense, with Brian. Like, to me, the spending freeze chaos of that happened earlier this week, and then this press conference today, reminded me of the COVID response. And the main reason, in my opinion, that Donald Trump did not win re-election was because of the general kind of chaos and disorder that people associated with him. That was most acute in COVID, but it wasn't just COVID. And this week kind of reminded me of that. And if that continues, it's going to be a bumpy ride, man. It really is. Because these are moments where presidents, elected officials should be bringing us together to unify us. And then when we look into it, if we find out that this was more than just human error, if there was any kind of structural thing, as I said, maybe we have too many flights coming in and out of Reagan. Maybe we shouldn't even have a major airport in that airspace. I mean, these are things, if we find it's more than just a human error, then of course we should try to correct that and make it better and make sure it doesn't happen again. But to wildly speculate on that right away when you had a moment to really kind of bring the country together, like I said, besides just being an unseemly way to handle it, also I think was a really a missed opportunity politically for Trump to show that he's grown, to show that he's more than this kind of firebrand person from right-wing social media. And I was kind of surprised, honestly, that he did that. I really was, because he started out with a moment of silence and trying to mourn, the people that we've tragically lost. And I thought, okay, this seems like the right tone. And then, it went off the rails quick.
All right, we're going to stay in the political realm, kind of. Charlie Marlow, Eric Messersmith, everybody settle down. This might be a little bit of a curveball, though, Eric, for you, because it's a topic, it's political, but we're going to move on now because it's kind of a social question. And I bring this up because you have this Catherine Levitt. She is the new White House press secretary. Very good-looking woman, by the way. I was talking about this last night with my wife. Now, maybe people shouldn't care. Maybe I shouldn't care, but I think this is interesting. She's 27 years old. Her husband, and I just found this out, I think he's about 60. Okay. So I read this article. He's 32 years older. And I only bring this up because I was also talking to my wife about Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, Patriots head coach, is 72, and his girlfriend is 24 years old. Now, when I just say those numbers, with Catherine Levitt, 60 and 27 or whatever it is, 32-year difference, I think that's inappropriate to me. I understand why the dude, the 60-year-old, wants to be with the 27-year-old. I get that. But I also, and I get older men wanting younger women. I guess my question is, where is the line? Like, when I see a picture of Bill Belichick with this woman, I can't help but laugh. I just can't. Like, and I would not be mad. First of all, I'm not really mad, but I think it's interesting. I wouldn't be mad if Bill Belichick's 72. What's the old adage was, you take your age, you split it in half, and you add 7. So, and that's the line. So for Bill Belichick, that would be 43, right? 43. Okay. For this 6-year-old dude with Levitt, that would be 37. I even think, 35. I guess my question is, where is the line? Like, when I see Bill Belichick with this 24-year-old woman, I just can't help but laugh when I see this.
I agree with you. I was really surprised when I found out that her husband was 60 years old. I wonder what you have in common with that big of an age difference. I will say, though, I do kind of see it with her, because say what you will about her, it's incredibly impressive that she has gotten to where she is.
Yes.
At 27 years old. That's insane. To be the White House press secretary, to be, pretty quick on her feet, to know a lot of these issues. I mean, the woman was in college 5 years ago, and now she's taking questions from the National Press Corps on live TV. That's amazing. And that shows I would say, unique maturity at that age. And so in that regard, it's not like she's the average 27-year-old who doesn't really have their life figured out. So I was surprised, obviously, when I saw, like you, the age difference. But then I kind of thought about it. I was like, if it's going to happen with somebody, it kind of makes sense. So what I'm saying to you is, I don't think it's as cut and dry as just the mathematical formula. I think there are certain people who are old souls, shall we say, who it makes a lot more sense that they're going to be with someone a lot older than them. But that said, it is a little weird to me. I think part of it is our modern society. We rightly looked at a lot of these really crazy age gaps that kind of used to exist and were just kind of common, especially with very young women, even girls. And we were like, hold on. Like, in a modern society, we're not going to accept that. We're going to set age limits. We're going to have, parental authorization to marry if you're under a certain age. We're going to put a stop to this, rightly so, right? But I will say, there's a reason it continues to happen, despite our modern society, despite people looking down on it. Because let's be honest, Belichick gets a lot of shit for that, and so does the girl that he's with, and maybe her more so. Like Leonardo DiCaprio, how much shit does that guy get because he refuses to date anyone over 22, even though he keeps getting older and older? I think he's in his mid-40s now. So it's not quite as weird. But if he keeps this up in his 50s and 60s, and he's already getting a lot, of flack for it. So I think what that shows you is that instinct to pair up in that way, an older man with a much younger woman, is very powerful. And look, if you look at human biology, it makes a lot of sense. What do men value pretty much above all else when they're looking for a mate? Looks, youth, right? I mean, that men are wired to reproduce, and the people who are best at reproducing are younger. And right? I mean, that's just biology. And on the other side, what do women value more than almost anything else? And again, I'm generalizing here, right? There are exceptions. Like clearly my wife is an exception. But most women, if you ask them in an honest moment, they would say something like security, right? Which doesn't always translate to money, but there is a high correlation there. So I think it's just kind of, in a way, the most. I look at Trump. I mean, how old is Melania? She's in her early 50s, right? And he's almost 80. So there's like a 30-year almost age gap there. So I look, and that's not uncommon with very wealthy men, by the way. Especially if they didn't meet their wife when they were really young and have like a long-term, relationship. You look at wealthy men who get divorced, they're not going after 60-year-old women. Okay. They're not. They're playing in a different pool like Belichick. And so I just think there is a natural biological inclination there that lines up that is really powerful. And I think to say that it's not, you just have your head in the sand. I mean, well, I'm not saying these are the only things people look for or the things that everybody looks for. I just think these examples we have of this show you that there's a really powerful impulse there in society.
Right. I think I called her Catherine. It's Caroline Levitt. And by the way, so this is going to be a compliment, but a woman would never take this as a compliment. When I found out she was 27, I thought she was older. But that's not to say that she's, if you tell any woman they look older, they're not going to take that well. But I'm actually saying this as a compliment because she does carry herself very well. She has a mature look. So I'm actually not trying to criticize her whatsoever. I was surprised. I wasn't thinking she was 40, don't get me wrong, but 35. But again, she looks very youthful, but I'm saying this because she carries herself well. She's very professional and all that. And I agree with everything you said, but so my question is the line. Like, I think Leonardo DiCaprio is more like pushing 50. If it's 50 with a 25-year-old, that's also, although he's been dating like 18-year-olds, right? That's where to me it gets creepy. And I get it, but still, like, dude, you can't find like a 24-year-old that looks the same as that girl that's 18 or 19. Come on. And by the way, I saw a video the other day of Melania. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody who's watching. I think Melania was about 26 and Trump was about 53 when they got married. I think that's about, and to me, that's not as, it's just on paper, 60 and 27 to me feels worse. But then Belichick, 72 and 24. Right. Like, it's laughable. It really is almost, and this is really going to be a shot at Belichick because look, he's still going to be a football coach for North Carolina and all that, but like it almost reminds me of God, I remember her name now. Oh, Anna Nicole Smith, right? It almost reminds me of Anna Nicole Smith with the dude who was
100 years old.
Like, right? It's not quite that because Bill Belichick is a young 72, but like the fact they met on an airplane, right? I mean, the fact that he thought he had a chance with her,
right?
Amazing, right? And then
who made the first move? Who made the first move there is what I'm curious about.
And we look at the picture, it's not even father-daughter. It's more of a grandpa-granddaughter. It would be very possible and easy for a 72-year-old man to have a 24-year-old granddaughter. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think, I get it. A 6-year-old dude with a 42-year-old woman. I get it. I don't even blink an eye. A 57-year-old dude with a 33-year-old woman, whatever. Like, I don't even bat an eye. But some of these disparities, man, are just cuckoo.
It's hard for me to criticize it too much. I do agree with you that it feels weird. But I think that in each individual circumstances is different. Number one. Number two, Anna Nicole Smith, there was a big difference there. She was married to that guy. right? Like she was it was 100% obviously transactional for pretty much anyone that watched it, right?
Whoa.
So that's different than Belichick. Like they're not married. I'm sure he helps facilitate her lifestyle. But that is, again, that's another thing that is not uncommon. Do you know how many men who are older pay for lifestyles for not just their main chick, but their side chick or their second side chick? I saw a guy the other day. It was hilarious. I don't even remember who this was, but they were saying how one of the things they've noticed is if they go to a restaurant in LA and there is an attractive waitress or bartender, they're not there the next time they go. And they say the reason for that is because as soon as a man who has some means comes in and meets them, he will begin some type of relationship, have them as the side chick with their lifestyle in an apartment, somewhere that he's paying for. Now, obviously that's an exaggeration, but I think the idea that this arrangement doesn't happen all the time throughout society, throughout human history, is crazy. In some ways, I give Belichick credit and this girl because at least they're just putting it out there. Like it's obvious what they're doing, the trade they are making, right? They are trading her youth and beauty for his money and status. Trump and Melania, another example. Like that trade happens all the time. And I'm cool with it being in the open as opposed to the way a lot of wealthy guys do it is like, the second or third side chick that they have in an apartment somewhere where they're paying for their lifestyle. So at least they're out in the open about this trade, and I say trade, it makes it sound like it's seedy, right? But really, it's what most people want, not to that extreme, but most men want an attractive, hot wife or girlfriend before pretty much anything else. I don't think that's crazy to say that. And most women want a man who either is really successful or has the potential to be really successful and could provide them with money. Now, obviously, we're talking about extreme examples, but those things happen all the time in human relationships, right? The difference is most men can't go out and pull, most 50 and 60-year-old men can't pull really hot 25-year-olds. That's the difference. If they could, a lot of them would. There would be a lot of marriages in trouble, right? And on the other side, not every woman can pull. There are only so many billionaires or, really well-off dudes who are single in their 50s or 60s, right? So not every woman pulling that either. So I think it's easy to sit back and judge, but when you're not in that position.
Okay, we're staying kind of in the political realm with, and I'll say it again, Caroline Levitt. I called her Catherine, I believe, earlier. I like this part about the Trump administration and what I heard of allowing podcasters. Now, they said influencers also. I don't know about the influencers if they're the TikTokers, but there's also some political influencers out there that have huge followings. I like the fact that they're going to open up these press briefings to the podcast types, to the new media types. And maybe some of the legacy media types don't like that. But let's be honest about audiences these days. Whether you want to talk about Joe Rogan or Theo Vaughn or Call Her Daddy for women, like the biggest audiences in the world are now on podcasts. I think it's pretty cool. And I think it's the right thing to do to open the press briefings. Now, you don't want them to be clown shows, right? But these people have huge followings. What do you think? I like it.
I'm okay with it. Yeah. I think it's going to produce a little bit of awkwardness, but so what? We're in a different world now. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with measured, nuanced responses to things. That was a world that sadly, by and large, has passed us by. And it's the same thing with media. Like the legacy media, there were some advantages to that. There was a certain, standard of journalism, but there were some disadvantages too. Like conservatives are right to say that for a long time, when we only had 3 networks and everybody who worked in those networks read the New York Times and Washington Post every day, you had this insular circle where you had these people that were fell victim to groupthink too often and didn't look at the other part of the country and say, hey, what do they think? And so I think the criticisms of the excesses of what I would call kind of the legacy media, a lot of them are totally legitimate. And a lot of the bias arguments are legitimate. So having more voices, having different perspectives, having people who do media in a new way, which is becoming the way. But look at CNN, what they're doing. They're shifting a lot of their resources to the digital space. Look at all the people that have left network jobs and now make their money on YouTube and podcast or other kind of social media ventures, Substack, something like that. It really has changed. And so I think adapting to that change in general is a really smart thing. I think so. I like what they're doing. I will say it was interesting that when I watched the first press conference that Levitt had the other day, many of the questions that she was asked were softballs from very friendly conservative media. She started with a few of them. So as long as people are aware of that, as long as they're aware that a lot of these, quote, new media people they're bringing in are essentially right-wing podcasters and conservatives who are going to be incredibly friendly to the administration, as long as people are aware of that fact, I'm fine with it. Let people in, expand the space. The control is gone that a few gatekeepers used to have, and it's never coming back.
On that note, Eric, we're going to call the show early. This is everybody settle down. I'm Charlie Marlow. That is the great Eric Messersmith. We'll be back next week with a longer show, but unfortunately, Eric, I got to go. I'll tell you about it in 1 second, but goodbye, everybody. Take care, and we will see you next week.